139 years.
Oh, I didn't know it was that.
I didn't notice that. It was 10 below here this morning.
We're here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They said Denver
Yeah.
was the coldest day in March in 139 years.
And Denver was the warmest spot because of the downtown heat
Oh,
island
heat.
effect.
Was it warm today?
It was colder up here than it was down there.
Gosh.
Oil heat down there. Oh, wait. Oh, darn. It was a little boy, but he's not gonna name it David. Emerson Allen Kramer
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Clinic
46.
Oh,
at Granby.
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, good for you. See?
Well, that about sums up the meeting.
Great
Good meeting,
job.
elbows. See you next time.
Perfect.
We should- Yeah, I was surprised when you moved it to 4 o'clock.
Hi, Paul.
Works for me.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so we'll start our Monday work session. And Scott, I think you've got the agenda for us.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. The first item is the school district's request to amend the IGA to update the methodology for land dedication and cash in lieu fees for school development. And I have been talking with Stephanie in Dan's office, and unfortunately she couldn't be here tonight. And so Dan's filling in, and we'll try and answer any questions you might have best we can. I did get your email. I didn't get a chance
Oh, I
to
wouldn't think you would.
do any research. Yeah, essentially, the town and the district entered into the IGA the first time in 1999, 2000, establishing the cash in lieu or land dedication. And that was then subsequently updated in 2007 to increase the value of developable land and the methodology at that time. And then since 2007, obviously we went through the downturn, and the district didn't want to make any requests at that point in time. But now that things have rebounded and in a very big way the last few years, the town has been issuing a lot of record numbers of building permits, and obviously that generates a record number of students each year. So this request is to update the methodology that it's been over a decade since we last visited it. With that, I guess, did you have anything you wanted to?
No, just my apologies. Stephanie had a funeral that she needed to attend today, and so she's the money gal on the educational side of things. So I've got a couple of notes, but we weren't able to meet in too much depth if you're asking specific numbers. And David, I did see your request. I told Scott that some of your questions that I'll get with Steph and we can get you some more detailed information on that. But
Okay.
And I'm guessing, does Denny Hill do
Yep.
the background analysis?
yes,
And so I'm sure that he's the school district's consultant, or planning consultant, and I'm sure that his numbers and everything are based upon averages.
yeah, and a couple of things that he looked at was the value of the developed land and the change that that's been in this area in the last 10 years, which has been significant. But then also actually bringing it back just a little bit, because what they term as yield of the number of students coming out of each home has gone down. So fewer students coming out of homes, so that's back the formula back, but then obviously the value of land has gone up.
And I was assuming when I saw student yield, that must mean, as I read it, in retrospect, I thought, oh, it must mean a new home brings .386 students in the elementary program?
Yeah.
Is that what the yield
Exactly.
is, new development? The acreage, I think, is staying the same capacity. There's a number of pages. I know the yield went down. Is that just kind of based on population data of the kinds of people moving here, or?
It is, it's indicative of just the United States in general, just slower birth rates than normal, less
Mhm.
kids per household. So
I was surprised the multifamily would be so much lower. I guess I was envisioning people almost with more kids in a multifamily setting. But just half, I mean, it's less than half, right? It's like a third of yield in
Why
multifamily.
do you have more kids in a multi-family? It's
More
less
families.
space
Yeah, more families, less space, yeah.
per unit.
At
Less
least I know
space.
4 of us grew up in 800 square feet duplex.
What we find though is that the multifamilies that are built in our district are not reflective of multifamilies in lots of other districts. And so they tend to be a higher end that a
Mhm.
young family with lots of kids aren't necessarily moving to our area.
It's not their starter
That's
home.
it.
It might be a more retirement kind of home.
Yeah,
Empty nester type situation.
although it went up a little from the 2007 numbers. And then you split single family into, looks like dense and less dense.
Into what?
Denser neighborhoods and then less dense neighborhoods. There's single family D and A, which didn't exist before.
Townhome?
D is typically 6 units per acre. A is a townhome, 6 to 14 units per acre. So you just have a new category there that,
And you know, David, I can't speak to that one. I didn't work with the demographer on that, but that's something I can certainly ask Steph.
and the only thing that's on the developed land value went from 106, this approximately to 156, so you get 50,000. Your multiples, your multipliers are going down, so the, but I think the statute that was referenced in somebody's summary gives the Board of County Commissioners the authority to do the whole, either dedicate land or pay holder. And I couldn't find whether there was a Weld County ordinance that then allowed local government to do that, or charter cities or something.
I couldn't speak to that.
Assuming the authorities there, certainly the statute goes on about the value there being fair market value, has to be fair market value. So you had someone doing an assessment of,
Yes, Denny Hill and Associates, Strategic Resources West, they're a demographer that's worked in the area and with the district, actually most districts in the area and some businesses for quite some time.
it feels to me like a 10 acre for an elementary school, I think it was 10 acres.
Was what?
It was 10 acres, I think, for an elementary.
Yes.
So
for
10
elementary.
acres on Pelican Hills is probably more valuable than 10 acres next to the power plant.
If the power
So
plant's in.
it seemed odd to me that you, I think you're using that same number in all calculations, so a developer putting a new development in a,
Yeah, I'm assuming that they're using an average,
yeah.
but we'd have to have strategic resources, probably. I think maybe what we might wanna do is with these kind of detailed questions, maybe if we could compile a list of demographer questions or methodology questions, and then Dan could have Denny get back to us with answers to those questions, because I don't know that Dan or I could answer them. We didn't prepare it.
And honestly, yeah, I mean, I just don't, I didn't know this existed, right? So the first time I'm looking at it, a part of me feels like, why would you want to use fair market, the same number for the value of the land? Because it will be quite different throughout your district, I would think.
It could be, but as we're putting, I mean, it averages across the district, but as we're looking at sites, I think the work to look at every specific site that we're buying in, what we're trying to do is it averages across the district, and we're building buildings across the district. So I anticipate that we would have some land that might be fair market value if you're looking specifically. Might be cheaper that we're purchasing over here versus the land that we've just purchased up around Pelican Hills.
Procedurally, Ian, I guess, or is this whole concept done pursuant to a public hearing at some point? Before we would agree to a rate change?
We'd need to hold a public hearing before we change the ordinance.
Okay, and so I think that's the opportunity in place where people can challenge some of the assumptions or the calculations.
Mhm.
So the question here is, you're looking for us to, we probably have more questions, but I want to be clear. You're asking us to give you some direction about the go-ahead on changing the methodology,
Right,
not necessarily the final numbers.
right. We have a draft ordinance in the packet
I saw that.
that if the town board wants us to schedule this for approval, then we can get the numbers or the answers to the methodology questions in the meantime, and either include those in the packet with the amended, or the ordinance, or we can get those to you ahead of time, see if there are any follow-up questions, and then schedule an ordinance for action if that's the town board's direction. I know that we met late last year when we first talked about it, and Severance has gone ahead and updated their methodology, and we're trying to keep it somewhat close so that they're working off the same numbers in the district, but not to make that a rush or anything, but just.
So I was curious too, to see comparable, you know, what equations are others using, in particular, I guess I'm mostly just thinking about, well, RE4.
So we work with 4 groups, Town of Windsor, Town of Severance, City of Greeley, and unincorporated Weld County. Right now, unincorporated Weld County is using this new formula. The Town of Severance has approved it, and we have not ever had an agreement with the City of Greeley. That's something that we've talked to them for many, many years about. They just weren't paying attention to that west side of Greeley. They are now.
Yeah.
And so District 6, there's a couple of districts that are now working with the City of Greeley to see that change. They were surprised that all three other entities that we worked with were doing something similar, so.
Yeah. I did note in my email, and this, for you, it looks like if the agreement was signed back in 1999, they revised the calculation, and there's an amendment in 2007, I think, that just changes the math, but they didn't change the termination clause in the initial agreement. That was a 10-year agreement with an automatic 10-year renewal, unless notice was given, so it'll expire in August of this year.
So we
So,
should
yeah.
probably negotiate an extension of the
Yeah.
agreement.
And just do that while, if we're gonna go in and amend the formulas now.
That's a good point.
Then, do you see the same growth in Greeley? I mean, obviously Severance and Windsor is well documented. On the west side of Greeley, what's the growth like there for you guys? Is it?
It is growing. It has not been as quick. However, they are telling us, Greeley has just come to the table and said that they believe 80% of their growth over the next 20 years will be within our district boundaries.
Wow.
Can you clarify for the board, what street is the eastern boundary?
74.
It's a, you'd be amazed how far.
We take in a
out you
chunk.
get.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that Big King Supers is on 71, I think,
yes, everything between here
pretty
and
much
there
everything west
is
of
in
there,
the district, yeah.
and that's all new.
Right.
And it's gonna go fast, so that's something
Right.
we're working with them too, Barry.
Open space there.
Mhm.
Dan, do you know when they bought the Severance property?
When they bought it,
Yeah,
was it 06? I think it was 06.
that was bought with cash in lieu,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw that in
that's good.
400,000.
Planning ahead there.
it was. They did very well with it. There is,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sorry, what?
No, they, wasn't it you?
With me?
He
No.
wasn't there.
I wasn't
Here.
Yeah.
You were in Fort Collins, right?
Nope, I came in 2005, so I was a Tozer. Yeah, that wasn't with me. But we did recently just buy with some cash and lose some additional property up here on the hill so that we have a high school site that was dedicated, and we worked with Mr. Lynn to increase so that it's now a middle school, high school site. We can put 2 sites on there. Now, there are some wells up there, so depending on setbacks and how things change in the next few years, we'll see if that cuts into what we can build and put up there, but.
Well, and the state only regulates the distance between new oil and gas wells and existing schools or buildings. So it would be a town setback for a new building to an existing oil and gas well.
Okay.
So I don't know that any changes the state makes would get into local building setbacks. So I
If the
think,
well is there first,
right,
then you go to our zoning setbacks, and I
Oh,
think it's
that's
good to know.
250.
Well, and what's proposed by that legislation is to give more local control
Right.
on oil and gas, so essentially it would revert back to what Scott's saying anyway, I would think, which comes back to what Windsor has deemed what we
That's.
want
good
as
to
far
know.
as setbacks and stuff.
Okay.
If it goes through, it hasn't gone, I mean, it obviously hasn't gotten
Yeah.
passed yet, but basically it's to give local control to local communities on how they wanna handle oil and gas.
So right now, our setbacks are 150, our setbacks from an existing well are 150 feet for like a business, but for a dwelling, it's like 350 feet. So if you go out to Rain Dance, they're building 350 feet from the well, basically.
right.
So, I mean, that's where we're at
Does the
right
school
now.
fall under?
But I don't really wanna get into the debate right now when it comes to local control. It's gonna force our hand to make some difficult decisions, because if they say it's not safe to put a well 1,000 feet from the school, is it safe to put a school 350 feet from a well? I don't know. Sounds like that'll become a,
I was thinking you should build a school around it, then you can have a vocational program for oil and gas.
well, we own the park in between the school and the well.
Yes.
And so,
Yep.
if you talk to like Eric Lucas, his comment was, this could be 10 years out, it could be done fracking by then, let's not create a problem that doesn't exist, because it could be done
Yep.
at some point now. I know some wells have like a 30-year lease, but I know they're getting capped all the time before then, so we just have to wait and see when the time comes.
Well, we did some preliminary concept drawings up there, and obviously those schools are off to the side. Really, it's baseball fields and dugouts, and some of those is, what would be built out there, not.
The way the lot looked like it was laid out, the schools were gonna be on the east side of the property anyway,
Yeah.
weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a good point.
So you also saw the payment in lieu of report that the district provided in the packet. And we've got those going back to 2007, if you would like to track the different reports over the last decade. This latest one does indicate that the district's been dedicated a total of 9 elementary sites, approximately 90 acres, and 3 secondary sites for 125 acres. And I guess some of those sites are reserved, some of them are dedicated, and some of them change over the course of time. So for example, the Takankala property that was master planned 10 years ago or more, reserved a 10-acre site, but the project never went forward. And so they haven't formally dedicated the property to the district yet. And now the ownership group is making changes. And so we've sent them to Stephanie to talk about how those changes will impact that particular site. Similarly, there was a 10-acre site in Water Valley South that was originally gonna be an elementary school site, but then after development started building out, it didn't appear as though the student yield was gonna be adequate to support that school. So that's kind of what prompted the whole moving of school sites or school dedication up to the Lebu property, I believe. And that school site in Water Valley South became another filing of homes. And so there's a school site that will be dedicated in Rain Dance, but it hasn't of yet been platted. So the dedication of land kind of evolves through the development of the property and the course of time, but we've also got a school site over in the Peakview Estates subdivision. They're getting ready to dedicate the school site up at the Ridge at Harmony Road. That's been platted, and I think they just need to do a little bit of site work yet to get it to the district. So we do have a handful of Windsor school sites in the district that, it just depends on whether or not the district, when they evaluate the subdivision referral that planning sends them, if they determine, yeah, we probably are gonna need a school site in this vicinity, then if the property or the development is big enough to support it, they might ask for land dedication, but if it's a smaller property, then that's usually
Cash.
when cash and lieu
Cash and-
would be the case.
Who's the sites on the property? Do you guys negotiate the site, or is it, they just say, here's 10 acres and
This is what we'd like to give you, is it's suitable for your needs, and then we can talk with them and work through some things. But, you know, by and large, the developers have been really pretty good at, you know, the ones I've been involved in have been with Mr. Lind, and he's been a good partner with us and
Yeah.
picking a site that'll work well.
And is it your decision on the cash or the land?
No, typically it's the developer.
Okay.
Dan, what do you have in reserves now in the fund balance for cash and lieu? Do you know? I thought I saw that number somewhere, but.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we're still at this 1.1 million.
1.1. So that would get you about 5 acres, right? 6 acres maybe?
Yep, there.
And that came down some because of we had just purchased some additional property to expand. You know, it was land up on the Lebu property that the developer really couldn't use, but we could, and we saw this could be a win-win for both of us, so.
So that is where you're gonna potentially put a high school and elementary school?
Middle and a high school with,
Okay,
again, one in rain dance for an elementary close.
yeah,
And again, that just depends, let me put it this way, David, they're large enough to have that, we'll see how the growth comes out and where we need to stick the next high school and middle school.
how quickly it builds out. I mean, they're piling pretty fast and furious.
It is right now.
Yeah, you drive up there and the homes. Has the board, have you heard of the report that came from our long-range planning, our facility planning group that met with the board last month? Their recommendation is that in 2020, the board consider a expansion of our 2 middle schools, as well as, we were originally thinking 1 elementary, but with the growth, it's going to need to be 2. And that'll be 2020, and then, you know, they have a kind of a 10-year look down the road. If trends continue, if there's not a significant slowdown, and probably 4 years after that, you'd be looking at a new middle school, an expansion of Severance High School and another elementary.
And one of the reasons I had asked Scott about, you know, seeing the inflows into this by year, I was surprised at the table that wasn't here, that there was a year or two, depending on the table, that showed a 0, I think, from Windsor.
And I think the reason you saw 0 on a couple of those was because we don't collect the fees on a permit by permit basis. We calculate what all of the permits for all of the lots are going to be, and we ask the developer to go to the district, pay the fees in a one lump sum, and then bring us back a letter from the district saying that all of the cash in lieu has been paid. So that way, we're not taking in school district fees, it just is a lot cleaner. So in those years that there was a dash or a 0, it's probably, there were still permits being pulled, but the fees for those permits had been paid in the previous year. Yeah.
And then I guess, I didn't see anything in the state statute driving this one clause in the 1999 agreement, but it says that any cash in lieu that's obtained, received, has to be spent within 10 years, or it has to be refunded. Again, I didn't see that in the statute, but it's in the agreement. And so what I didn't see here was the expenses. We see what you've received over the last 5 years, I think.
But where it's been
But
spent.
when it was spent.
Steph can give you that, she tracks that very closely, and so she'll say, we've got X number that needs to be used or spent, but we've never come close to
I wouldn't
coming
think
close to
so.
that 10 years just because of the growth.
I'm curious if that is required by statute.
In the statute, I couldn't speak
Because
to
if
that.
not, why would you?
Want it in the agreement. It might have been just something from the beginning that they didn't want it just to accumulate and grow and not be used. I'd be upset if I was a developer, right? And I
Yeah.
put this in, given this land, and 10 years later, there's still no school in my development, or,
Yeah, the PLO report, or payment in lieu of report, is a similar format that we get from the other two school districts as well. It's not really specific in the IGA as to what the report needs to look like, but it does say that we can ask for that additional information if we want it, And so, sounds like we can have Stephanie get us that.
Yeah, the agreement says if you don't spend it, after 10 years, you have to return it to
Yeah.
the, whoever it is now, plus 6% interest. So,
So-
hell, I'll give you the money now, that's a better yield than I'm getting.
you all heard it, he's giving us money.
Already?
Even more?
Yeah.
right.
That's not statutory, that's
We've
case law.
negotiated?
There's a case out of Fort Collins called the Bloom case that says one of the wings of Bloom says you need to collect what you think you're gonna spend. You can't just collect it indefinitely and not spend it. It needs to be spent. So those 10-year clocks are built in, similar to some of our impact fee ordinances say, if we don't spend it for the purposes for which it was paid, we have to refund it.
What if they give you the land and nothing gets built in 10 years on the land?
That's in here too. The
What
the
does it
agreement
say?
says that you take it back and, yeah. There's a right of first refusal from the developer. The developer doesn't want it, I think the town steps in and sells it in the market. So it is in there.
And a procedural question, if I did the numbers, look at it, it looks like it's a 30% increase in the cash in lieu fee. And I understand why we didn't do it since 2007, but do we need to do something that says we're gonna review this every 2 years, or every 3 years, or?
You know, we do prefer that we incrementally make
Yeah.
adjustments and not have
Yeah.
one big catch-up every 10 years, but in this case, I think we got off track with the downturn,
Right,
and kind of like we did with the road impact fee.
right, exactly,
We
I
kind of
forgot about
put
it.
things on hold for 5 or 6 years, and we
Yeah.
can definitely maybe set up an annual meeting to review the payment in lieu of report.
I don't know how often it needs to be, it just seems like it ought to be more than once every 12 years.
Mhm.
We would be happy to do that.
I think it'd be, because if the market, if we have a recession and the values go down, they could adjust downward
Absolutely.
theoretically.
Right,
I don't know if land will go down, but theoretically it could, or 2 years from now it could be even higher, so
right.
some type of periodic review, I think, would be wise
Mhm.
for everybody.
And if that works better for the town, it would work better for us as well. We've been hesitant to do it just because we feel like we ask a lot, and we're going back for bonds and saying this and this, and so then to always be coming and saying, we've tried to be sensitive to that as best we can and only ask when we need, but
Right.
if that works better for the town, just because then it doesn't catch developers in a, oh my goodness, this is a huge 30% increase,
Yeah,
puts things in perspective.
yeah.
Would be happy to do that, Scott.
Yeah, I just think it's more fair to everybody involved if we do it, maybe not every year, but every
Sure.
year, whatever the market tends to, some kind of guideline on
Sure.
this again. Another question, since you mentioned bond, you talked about expanding 2 middle schools in 2020, you're looking at a bond issue?
For what?
Are you looking at a bond issue in 2020?
That is what
Okay.
has been recommended to the board.
In 2020?
Yep.
That's what I thought, okay.
Yep.
Then one other question for Scott. If we move forward with this, when will this be implemented?
Well, that's another question for the board, is,
Okay.
I'm assuming the Well County and Severance probably implemented upon adoption, or did they delay an effective date?
I believe they implemented upon adoption.
Okay, so in order to get the word out to the development community, or the building community, it's really the development community, because we do
Right.
require the payment in one lump sum. conversation for the board and Dan to have as far as if we delay the implementation, what that means to the district or,
Right.
what,
So what would be fair?
I mean, I had some questions certainly just on the math
Mhm.
and the assumptions behind this, but I think we would have a hearing, right? We'd
There's a public
invite
hearing
the
requirement in the
developers to come
ordinance.
in and testify as to what they think, I guess, is
Would
from
this be a
our
public hearing?
the
I
ordinance.
think legislative, okay,
What's that?
legislative.
Yeah, yeah.
Give us a name.
Okay,
But the decision about the effective date, I would think that's the district's, it's their fund, we're just the conduit.
yeah, it's a district, it's a side.
Well, we would be happy to work with you. It's been 12 years.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
this
Couple
isn't
months.
done, yeah, a couple months isn't gonna break
Yeah.
us. It's been, and just depending on your sensitivities with developers or things that you know that are going on, we'd be happy to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to catch people off guard, but we also don't want to wait
Exactly.
another 12 months. You know?
We've delayed some.
Yeah, it's been, a few months.
I wanna say on the road impact fees, didn't we delay them like 60 days or something like that in order to
I
get?
think so.
I thought it was 60 days, it's
Yeah.
kind of the deal we made with the developers.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
So could you phase it over 2 years, 15, or some?
You said you gotta collect it all at once, though, right?
We collect a lump, well, we don't even,
Depending on
collect-
when they submit the,
we have the developer go to the district, write a check, bring
Right.
back a receipt, and then we check that item off the requirements in the development agreement. If we were to implement it in 2 phases, then it does kind of create a different fees in Windsor than the rest of the district
Right.
situation.
Okay. So, other questions? For Dan or Scott? So you need to hear from us, kind of an idea of go forward, or?
Well, I think we've got some questions that we know the board wants some more follow-up on, that we can definitely follow up outside of a work session and get those to you. But as far as being comfortable with scheduling the ordinance for the update for a future town board meeting, is that the direction the
sounds
town
like,
board wants to go?
to have the hearing,
Yeah.
Right, schedule the public hearing.
Yeah.
when's our next?
We're good.
End of the month?
So
The-
we'll get you the information first regarding
You
the
want some more information and look at
the
something
answers
scheduled?
to your questions, the methodology information from Denny Hill, get you all that information, and then we'll send out a draft schedule for the public hearing and ordinance adoption with that information.
And based on this conversation, let me go back and kind of revise, 5 or 6 questions, I'll kind of
Okay.
narrow it down, I'll get it to you and forward it to
Great.
the district as needed.
I'd actually like it if you'd forward that to all of us,
Yeah,
because
you should.
if we're needing to make decisions and you're asking questions that could end up leading us to a conclusion on, you know, I know we give you crap about questions, but I mean, in all seriousness, you bring up
Right.
some stuff that,
No, that's good.
I don't want it to be well, yeah, you got your questions answered, and we're all going, well, what were the questions? We don't even know.
I think
if
Shane
they-
usually does forward the answers out to all
Yeah,
of
I'm
us.
just always.
Yeah.
However, it needs to
I don't
happen,
wanna copy
but.
everybody.
No,
No, and,
So
and
that's
that's
why I
what
said that.
and that's what I meant, is we will send out the
Get to
additional
Scott,
information
Scott.
to everybody,
okay.
as well as the schedule for the ordinance and the draft
Yeah,
Yeah.
ordinance.
okay,
Sound good?
yeah,
And Steph is back in the district tomorrow, so you
Okay.
should be good to go.
okay.
Sounds good. Well, we'll get that out to everybody as soon as possible, so that if there are any follow-ups, you can let us know.
Thank
All
you.
right?
I appreciate your time, everybody.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Safe, Bill?
Stay warm.
Thanks.
Show us some information for Dan first.
And Ken,
Keep in mind,
Okay.
back in
This
2007,
is relative.
they increased the market value of that land from 40,000 to 106.
This is
So-
2.5.
Right.
This is-
That's why I think the more frequent
It's
reviews,
like all
the
slippery
better.
sliders.
Did you want to come to this end here, or do you want to stay on that end?
Right.
either way,
Why do people live here?
Did you need to use the overhead, or,
Did you send everybody the report, or you want me to pull it up with?
I have
Everybody's got the report in the packet.
Okay,
So I think we'll get the packet going.
someone can reference that, or we can pull it up on the screen, I have my computer if you have it on your tablets, you want
okay.
to follow
Yeah.
along.
Is
everyone okay if we just
Yes.
use the?
Don't know that any of us know how to run it.
Anything more than a duplex. Single family attached is a
Would it be
duplex.
easier to,
3 or more is a duplex.
Would it be easier to pull it up on the screen or?
We can do that.
If it's handy.
Slide that basket down there.
Yes,
See-
sir.
See what the entrees are tonight.
If we don't show it overhead, people watching at home can't see what we're talking about unless they pull up the packet,
Oh,
right?
good point.
Right.
So now a lot of people are watching that. Is there, people do.
If you're
I
watching,
get
send me a
questions.
text.
People, I get, I get questions.
I'm surprised, you know, some of these reports for the pilots, they use the funds to buy CDT shares. So what school has its own water district? I mean,
Well, they can use it for sleep.
So is there a cable to attach or is it wireless
CBT shares?
to send?
They need water for the
There's
school
a-
and for
network.
their augmentation.
It should be, I think.
That could come out of
It should be
the
within
cash
the
flow.
wireless network.
Right.
If I recall, I think it's just
Right,
password.
it's part of,
Because
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
network.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna, if it's just augmentation, don't buy pure raw water.
Yeah, then if you get to the working direction.
Go one of these
Presentation
gravel
stuff.
ponds. I don't- just seemed odd they're buying CBT shares.
Well, they had to give something
Good, how are you?
to get the treated water.
So I missed where Shane and Christie are at. Do they have their own party tonight?
Let
Shane?
them their own district.
Texted me, he was not feeling very well yesterday,
Oh,
and his son had a temperature of 102, so he was gonna stay home
Scott.
today.
I would say,
I know Scott. Yeah.
I would say.
I think he already has a stack of mine.
It's going around.
You have a sick kid too? Yeah. Okay. Mr. Scott.
So is that pulled from yours or is it?
Yeah.
That's just.
I just pulled that up,
Okay.
off the network, so that
Okay.
it's,
Is there, oh, that's the mouse scroll through.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
so, yeah, look, I just want to introduce Caleb Solzin, the new building official for the town, or for the Safe Built office here in Windsor. So,
Welcome.
hello?
you've been with Safe Built now,
Almost 2 months.
so.
So, yeah, since Kelly left, I've come from Virginia. So I've worked in code enforcement with building inspections the last 15 years in Virginia. And worked my way up through, started in a small county in central Virginia, between Richmond and Charlottesville. And then we had a 3-man department and my manager wasn't gonna retire for the next 15 or 20 years. So I moved up to the Northern Virginia area to Fairfax County. Slightly different population, about, went from an area that was about 600 square miles with 30,000 people to a county that was 500 square miles with 1.3 million people. So, a little bit of a difference, had about a 120-man building department just for the building inspections and plan review.
Oh my God.
So, so worked my way up through several levels of management, and then I was at the International Code Conference in Richmond for the code hearings in October. And one of the recruiters from Safe Built was there, had a booth, and they recruited me to come out here to Colorado. So, yeah. it's-
You get a relocation,
Yeah.
you get a relocation package, new pair of skis.
They didn't give me the skis, but they did pay me.
A fixed coat?
Yeah.
That's your SUV and.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to
Yeah,
the area.
so, yeah, it's, I mean, one of the things that really attracted me to the area was, you know, and we rented a house right here in town. And just, you know, I have 4 children, my wife and I, and so, you know, it was, we saw it was rated in one of the top 10 places in the country to raise a family and a lot of activities for kids and family, and so it really was attractive to us. So we're glad to be here. So this report is from 2018, which is before I started, but, you know, I can run through and just kind of walk through the numbers. If you have specific questions, I may not have the detailed answers, but, we'll do the best I can. I also brought a copy of the 2017 report just for kind of comparison for the numbers' sake. Are you familiar kind of with the layout? This is similar to the previous years. Have you gone through the previous years you want me to walk through, or I just want to know how in depth of a presentation do you want?
I think
Or just
just
kinda
hit
hit the high points.
hit the high points, yes.
20-minute version.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, just,
Well, 7 o'clock.
So yeah, Safe-Built's been growing this, and this office out of Windsor and the town of Windsor being one of our biggest clients, you know, so we really appreciate the business as it shows here with the town. Our goals, giving back, being participating in the community, not just serving as the building department, but also participating in the community is a big value of Safe-Built. I spent a couple days over at the high school here, just a week or two ago, talking with some of the classes, talking about building codes. They were in different design and engineering classes, and just kind of sharing with them how what we do dovetails with what they may be looking at with design, or even as they're getting into buildings, or they, you know, the building they go to school in or work in, and how safety plays a role in that. And tiny houses are something that's trying to come up big, and so that's all.
Tyler, come here.
I like that.
And so I gave them all a challenge I gave them the code parameters of what constitutes a dwelling unit, as far as a kitchen, a bathroom, a sleeping area, your minimum living space, and see how small of a living space they could develop that had all of those incorporated in it. And so I got a lot of different answers, but one young lady came up with 150 square feet. So that's about a 10 by 15 area that would incorporate a bathroom, kitchen, a little bed space,
It's a camper.
and basically, yeah, but that would meet all the code requirements of a dwelling
That's cool.
unit. So, yeah, it was a fun exercise with them, so they.
Is she very short?
What's that? But a lot of them didn't realize, even as they were working the numbers, until I kind of blocked off a space in the corner of the classroom and told them, well, this is about what that space looks like.
Size of their bedroom.
They're like, whoa, okay, it's like, that's, because they're thinking, oh, well, I'm gonna add in a big shower, and I'm like, no, you're talking about a tiny space, not a, not a big sectional sofa or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just, you know, enjoying just that outreach. We also gave them the flyers for the Windsor Scholarship. So that's something we do every year. It has in here that we've done that last year with the $2,000 scholarship, so we're doing it again. We kind of changed up the format a little bit this year, wanted to and just advertise it more, get more participation, because we hadn't gotten a lot of applicants in the past. So just, you know, raising awareness of that, the opportunity, and then asking them to write a little essay about their involvement with the community, and just emphasizing community value there, so.
There's other school districts, maybe reaching out to them might get more
So,
interest.
yeah, we do one with Severance also, so we do one which they're combined right now, but when they split off, we'll have the two separate ones.
We've also got the Poudre School District and the Thompson School District on the west side of town, so I think.
Okay.
They don't go to Windsor High School or
Right,
Severance.
right.
So I wasn't aware that there was, are those over in Fort Collins, or is
They're
there
in the,
another?
yeah, so in the Larimer County side of Windsor, the southwestern part of town goes to Loveland to school, and the northwest goes to the Poudre School District.
So Miles, all of his district is Poudre School District, basically
Okay.
Fort Collins and the surrounding area. My district is, has all three.
Yeah.
Well, you have a little bit of Loveland too, don't you? Yeah, but the Loveland share is pretty small. But when we see stuff like this, we do, whenever we can, try to include all Windsor. So we have some kids in Windsor who might be eligible who don't know about it. So we might want to think about how do we identify those kids from other school districts that
I
actually
was
live in
gonna talk to
Windsor.
the rec center about posting some flyers, because we did have some flyers advertising it, so that could be a way to outreach. And we talked about maybe posting something here, but is there a contact for those other schools that were?
I can get you the contact
Okay.
information, and we want to make sure that they get the word out that it's for Windsor.
Windsor residents.
Windsor students,
Residents,
yes.
Yeah,
Right.
they're in Windsor city limits, yeah. 'Cause there's probably somebody from the school district who could identify who those kids are and
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
get the word out.
Right.
I know I've been working with the school counselor secretary here, so maybe touch base with her and see if she can maybe forward that to the other schools for the Windsor students. All right, so, one thing you'll see here, we just upgraded a lot of systems. Safe-Built's been growing a lot. This was our initial office back in the early '90s, out of Windsor, and it's grown across the country. So nationwide, 17 states, and now we've grown to over 1,200 employees. So as the company's grown, we've had to make some changes to keep up with our software systems and different things like that. So one change we implemented right before I came in, it's like first part of January, went live with a new software system called Community Core that has more features, more interactive capabilities, you know, with the towns and can handle more of the volume that we're doing. So that's a good thing. There's been a few little bumps anytime you introduce a new software, even though they do all the testing initially. It always creates a few things. So you know, we're working through those as they come up.
And we appreciate Tricia and her team. She's listened to all of our feedback and they've been responsive to get things corrected, so.
Yeah. So that's kind of coming down here in the technology piece. So we do use iPads in the field for the inspectors, where they're entering information and data live as they do the inspections, and that gets emailed out to the contractors, as well as currently we are still leaving handwritten tickets. We're looking at, and I'm not sure if there's local ordinances or something that, you know, as far as, you know, if electronic notification would constitute. I know most states and localities do accept email notification as a form of written notification for inspection results. We've been doing both, but it does duplicate the time that it takes for the staff to be able to both enter it in onto the iPad and handwrite tickets. So
We'll have
we're
to talk
looking
to
at,
Ian about that.
yeah. So I know there's legal things as far as like some, you know, local or state laws that can impact that.
So that might be a state or it could be a local difference.
Yeah, we've seen both, and depending on the different states that we've dealt with, so, but we're looking for ways to streamline and make our, you know, our staff more cost-effective and, you know, efficient, so. We are in the new code adoption process, and I've sent that over to Scott with the draft ordinance and the new codes. So the 2018 building codes are what we're gonna be hopefully adopting with some local amendments and moving forward. Fort Collins, Greeley, Loveland is still in the process because they're going through some management change, but they're in the process of adopting. But Greeley and Fort Collins, Weld County, Larimer County have already all adopted the 2018 code. So most of the area is already on it, and we're
Yeah, and I think you'll see on the future meetings agenda
Has some updates.
that
Yeah.
mid-April, I believe is when we.
I think April 15th, tax.
Yeah, tax
Yeah.
day. We'll be talking about the code update, adopting the 2018 codes. From what I've spoken with Caleb and Russ, there's a lot of, previously, they were amendments to the code that are now in the code already. So we can eliminate a lot of amendments
Yeah.
and we can kind of streamline some things. So I think it's gonna be a pretty good update. And then also, you may recall last year, the planning commission had asked about the potential for a contractor licensing program. And we
I was gonna ask
haven't,
about that.
we haven't come back with anything on that yet, but I'm trying to see if we can replicate something similar to what the town of Timoth does from a contractor licensing standpoint that isn't onerous and doesn't also require us to have our own testing programs and things. They more or less have a reciprocal, if you've got a license in Fort Collins or Loveland or Greeley, we can take that, accept that as having passed their tests, and then register, take insurance, proof of insurance, those kind of things, and make it as simple for the building community as possible, but also we'll be registering all of those people doing work in town. So that's just conceptually what we'll be talking about at that April 15th work session, to see how the planning commission.
That helps protect the citizens too, so that they're not hiring people who aren't licensed or don't have insurance and.
Does
And
that involve a performance bond too, or just
no, I
insurance?
don't believe just the insurance.
So it's larger projects where you get into bonding?
Well, this would be for each individual builder or
Right.
subcontractor. So, you're talking about maybe commercial, multifamily projects, that kind of thing.
Larger projects?
Then,
where
yeah,
you-
those, we would have separate insurance or performance bonds through the agreements for those projects. But, yeah, I'd like to get more direction from planning commission and town board in April to see if that's the direction we wanna go. It is, you know, we've been fortunate over the last 20 years to have a good quality, building community. But as we grow and as we grow at the rate we are growing, we have received more complaints about quality and things like that, I think we wanna look into that. So along those lines, not only the contractor licensing, but I have a residential construction guidelines concept that I want to discuss in April as well. And this is something that goes above and beyond the building code. It would be a voluntary program, but the concept is that we would want to recognize those builders that are going above and beyond and maybe make them a preferred builder in Windsor if they certify that they're going to go above the minimum building codes and meet certain criteria that the planning commission and town board may want to adopt. This is another conceptual, it's more of a carrot approach, it's something that's voluntary if somebody wants to do it. We would recognize them as being a builder that builds to this higher standard, so
Is
it's.
that full residential build, or does it include remodeling too?
You know, that's something to be fleshed out.
Yeah.
It could be. Right now, I'm just looking at it from a single-family detached homes perspective. And one of the first items that I would want to address, I think, some of the things that we hear most complaints about are failing concrete and flat work. So if somebody's stretching their budget to get into their first home, and then 2 years later, they've got to replace the driveway or the patio, it's a real disservice that, you know, and that's not something that Safe Building specs, it's not something that requires a building permit. It's flat work that just was done in a poor workmanship. So if we have standards that say new driveways and patios, if you want to be recognized as one of Windsor's best, then you'll build to this certain concrete mix, you'll have road base, you'll have rebar, and the whole thing that, you know, in years past, maybe we didn't have to go there because the concrete wasn't failing, but now some of it is. And so that's just another concept for the 15th. So I don't want to go into it all tonight, but it's something that I'd like to just plant a seed that we'll talk about it that night, so.
So this would be stuff we can't legally require. In
This
other
would-
words.
We could legally require it, but then we'd have to require permits and inspect it and all of that. This is going above the minimum building code, so we're getting into quality, which isn't
It's a
something.
voluntary program, not a
Yeah.
required program, so it's not required across the board, but if they volunteered to be on the preferred list, then they would have to comply with that or they'd be removed from the list. So that would be the only requirement or thing that would be in jeopardy, would be being on the preferred list or not.
And how does this list get out to people who are looking for builders? Do we advertise,
We would
Publicize it?
conceptually, we could have a list of preferred builders on the website. You know, when you go to get a building permit, here's some people that have certified that they're gonna build with these standards. And, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I like
It's-
it.
Is there any liability? Like, what if they don't? Who's inspecting to make sure the concrete mix is?
So if I guess,
You wanna say that to the 15?
yeah, I think so.
That's fine.
We've got some
Keep moving.
ideas, right, we've got
There's
some
obviously
Long
some
as long-
interest, I'm biting my tongue too. No, but I think it's good interest, so.
One question I have is when you get into contractor licensing,
Mhm.
how small of a scale are you talking about?
Project size.
Right, project size, you're going to be modeling, I mean, I'm thinking about a retired neighbor who decides he's gonna be installing water heaters.
Mhm.
I mean, how small,
Well, he would have to be a licensed plumber.
I would, that's been
So-
the issue, right?
Right.
Because you're allowed to work on your own home without being a licensed contractor, and you wouldn't need to meet those contractor requirements
Right, if you
to
do it
work on your own
yourself.
home, but if you're, once you're doing it
Somebody
for
else
pay
for
for someone
pay.
else.
So anybody, a brother-in-law who's doing it for pay, or a neighbor, would have to meet these licensing. No, I think that's an
Yeah.
issue.
No,
It's
anybody doing
any
any of the
any work
trades
for pay.
The
in
only way
town.
they would have, because there's always
Okay.
loopholes, the way that they would have around
Right.
it would be, the
Right.
homeowner pulls the permit for the work, his brother-in-law helps him out.
Right. And that's hard to manage, but
Yeah.
anyone who's running a business,
Yeah, and I don't think
Okay.
those are the kind of complaints that we're getting. It's more the people who don't know who they're hiring.
Right.
And they get somebody and then they come in and do poor work.
Poor
Yeah.
job. And it blows up.
In your example, they just have some family members that aren't on speaking terms anymore. But,
Yeah.
no, I think
Yeah,
that's,
and they're not required to have an inspection?
On the flatwork driveways don't fall under building code, it's not a structure, it's single for a patio.
yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
you know,
And the code says anything under 6 inches in height, I think, doesn't require a permit.
Okay.
you know.
But the steep driveways
Those,
have to meet code, right?
so that wasn't a building code, that was an engineering code, and they do need to meet the 10% slope criteria. And so when they started pouring driveways that were steeper than that, was in violation of the engineering code,
Okay.
and we followed up accordingly, so.
So we've had a fair number of turnover with staff as far as hiring new people, our staff's grown, we also added another inspector who's gonna be starting soon. Down here at the bottom of this, Dennis Lillmeyer from our plan review office is retiring this summer, so looking to hire a plan reviewer to replace him. Kind of across the board throughout the building industry, people are retiring. Had a lot of people that started 25, 30 years ago in inspections as a career, and now they're retiring, so replacing, you know. Also, there was a law that was passed, it went into effect January 1st, where all electrical inspections in the state of Colorado have to be performed by either a journeyman or master electrician. Even if you have electrical certifications, if you don't hold a journeyman or master's license, you cannot perform electrical inspections. You'll see a lot of the inspectors that we have on staff are electricians. We have a couple who are not, but, you know, in the cases where if you have an inspector who's not an electrician, if he goes to do a whole house concealment, then he can only look at the plumbing, mechanical, and framing, someone else has to come in and look at the electrical, so, kind of, you know. And that's something that, not just Safe Built, but also a lot of the jurisdictions in Colorado are lobbying against that to get that removed, but it's a year or 2 year process probably to get that law changed. They slipped it in with another bill and no one was aware of it until it was passed, one of those type of
But then
things.
you'll have all people qualified to do it.
Yeah, so, yeah, so but we've also been helping out some communities where they have their own building departments, but they didn't have electricians on
Right.
staff, so we've been able to kind of assist in those areas.
Supplement that,
You know,
that's good.
so here's a few projects that.
And one more thing on the staff, and Dory was the fourth person down on the list, and
Yes.
she's the permit technician that assists our in-house permit technician, Robin Volner. And so Dory's right here in Town Hall on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so she does a great job helping, especially, I don't know if you saw in the weekly update, we issued 97 single-family homes last month. I think our previous record was maybe in the 60s.
Yeah.
So Dory definitely is helping out.
Yeah, yeah, she's a sharp young lady too.
Can I ask this really quick? So when the Spring Hill Suites Hotel is actually finished, how much is it still gonna be worth? It's only been going for 3 years. I was just curious what it'll still be worth when it's actually finished.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
going up.
Is the value going up or, all right, well, I digress.
It's gotta be going up, right?
I hope so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so these are some of the larger projects.
they're gonna change
you know,
names, Spring Valley.
obviously, you'll see some of them. Yeah. You know, just some highlights, Good Samaritan Assisted Living Facility, then you have the Spring Hill Suites, Fuzzy Stalker Shop, Associates of Family Medicine, Old Windsor Mill renovation, $5 million project, Greendale, Human Being Drive-Through, a couple smaller areas. And as you know, there's a lot of dirt moving, a lot of new projects coming, so it's blowing up.
And as you can imagine, with the size and scope of some of those, like the Spring Hill Suites and the Good Sand and the mill, it occupies a lot of Safe Built's time, so those are big projects.
We do it, and we've been, as you'll see kind of coming down here too, this next section's community outreach, but just to skip ahead, the self-assessment, you know, we're still performing next day inspections, and so we've been able to keep up with that. And when necessary, if we get swamped one day, we'll pull staff from one of our other offices, from Firestone or from North Glen or other areas if we get a big spike, because there's days when your inspection volume doubles, you know. Up here on Apex Drive, when they had multifamily units, they had one day they called in like 60 units for concealment inspections. Well, that's gonna take somebody all day just to walk through and do those inspections, so that takes one staff member, you know, out of the loop for the rest of the day's support, so we brought somebody up to cover for that day. Plan review for residential is still on a 5 business day, so 1 week turnaround, we've been able to successfully keep up with that. The commercial 10-day turnaround, that's for projects under $1 million. Once you get these larger projects that are over $1 million, it's a 20-day turnaround. And sometimes people confuse that turnaround with their permit issuance. That's our initial review and getting the comments back to them. But if there's comments they have to address, then they still have that back to us, and then we'll address that and get back to them. But when you get a large project, you know, like the Good Samaritan or something like that, that's big scope, or even a high school or large school project, then it takes some time to go through it and make sure that everything's.
Yeah, and to help with that, those more complex projects, it helps that Caleb and Michael from Safe Built attend our development review committee meetings on Thursday mornings, so they get to meet these people that are doing, as they're going through the site plan process, and we put them in touch with them and the fire marshal, so that concurrently they can be working on building plans and, I guess, getting all those big ticket issues identified so that it goes a lot smoother during the building permit process.
We can let them know what the overall requirements are, so they can build that into their initial proposal instead of having to make changes later down the road. And then the waived fees for the town fees, there was $1,459.67 that were waived in town fees. So back up to community outreach, that kind of touches another point you made there.
I think
With the submittal meetings, because we do meet with the commercial contractors, there's a form of outreach.
you may have waived a few more fees than that.
That might
because
have been carried over from last year,
Yeah,
because I
'cause
thought
I
it was the
think-
same number.
We built the public works facility last year, or was that
Okay.
the
That
year
was 2
before
years
last? Okay, so maybe it was. yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
Scott, Safe Built waives fees on all the town projects.
The
don't they?
town's
Yes.
projects. And then
School?
they've actually,
Well, the schools are county projects, so I believe they still pay the fees, because.
so yeah, the school districts can either pull a permit through the state,
That's
or
true.
they can pull it through the local jurisdiction. And since Safe Built has that agreement with the school district, the school district can opt to go one way or another, and they usually opt with Safe Built because the state only has 3 or 4 inspectors, and they can't get them up here.
Turnaround time.
And so it's a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
But I think, I just wanted to also, the mill, Safe Built also worked with us to waive fees on the mill because it was such a, long dormant project after the tornado that in order to, I guess, incentivize getting it rebuilt, Safe Built joined the town and partnered there. I think I'm forgetting another one, that there've been a couple of other private projects that Safe Built's actually helped us with as well.
Don't we get a refund or some sort of rebate back from them?
That actually changed with the last amendment to the agreement. You recall, we changed the percentage from 10 to 20%, and now instead of collecting 100% of the building permit fees, passing them through to Safe Built and having them rebate back a portion, we now just keep 20%
Give them.
and pass through the remainder. So
Is that the couple $100,000 or whatever I see like once a month or something like that that's
those are
going?
yeah, that's paying for Safe Built services,
I don't
yeah.
think that was.
So we collect it and then pay them, is that what I'm saying?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, and so it's a split fee, so you retain your portion and then just pay us. And then we actually bill, so the town collects the full fee, and then at the end of the month, we bill back to the town for the portion.
And the fees that are paid to Safe Built, they don't include any, obviously, all of our impact fees and all those other fees, we keep those 100%. It's just the plan review, building,
Building permit fees.
permit fee and plan
What-
review.
There's like some electric, service fees, there's some other smaller fees they
Right,
can add in, but anything building related, we would collect the
right.
percentage on. Yeah. So here, we already talked about the youth scholarship, we do a workshop every year, so we're gonna do that once the new code's adopted, and we'll do it based on the new code, as an update. Either with basements or possibly decks, because there's actually a lot of code changes addressing deck construction. That's something that's really big, and we're seeing an increase in the area, so a good workshop on, for homeowners that wanna build their own deck.
What's your turnout like on those?
I believe it's about 20 people or something like
Yeah, I
that when
think
they
last-
hold one.
I think last year's basement finish permit was pretty well attended, and it's usually at the rec center, but now I'm not sure if we may have to find room at the Public Works or something, because it's
Yeah.
getting harder to find a room over
Yeah,
there.
And what I'd like to do this year, if we're able to, is even just do a little bit of a mock-up or a cross-section of, obviously not a full-scale deck, but, just to use some kind of examples and some of the different things. But there's a lot of good changes in the 18 code that are gonna actually add flexibility for decks, because they're no longer going under the home requirements, like for a floor within the house. It's all separated out to address just the deck. So since the deck isn't a house or floor that's inside a structure, it's kind of a unique thing on its own. So now there's a full-blown, and there's always been a few little sections that addressed it, but now they've expanded that, and it's really a good thing for decks. So, but we'll kind of get more into that when we do the April 15th presentation. Also, the All-Town Barbecue, which was September last year, we're looking forward to do that again this year.
Sounds like that's not gonna be a barbecue this year?
No, he's talking about the one down here at the pavilion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That
so
the town is invited to, I would call it the
Yeah,
old
we
town.
invited all the towns that we serve.
Oh, okay, I was getting mixed up
You
with
think
the,
that the chamber one?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so,
Too many barbecues to keep up with.
yeah.
The old
That's a problem.
That's right, right.
So,
Yeah, they have barbecue in Virginia?
oh, yeah.
I know.
It's a big southern thing, so it's, and I've got a big smoker grill, I like to smoke meat, so I'm thinking, this year I probably won't, do the catering myself. I'm thinking maybe in future years I'd like to roll that out and do some catering. I just did a brisket a couple of weeks ago, it was pretty awesome. So, that's my hobby outside of work, is smoking meat.
So mark your calendars for this fall.
Yeah.
We might get more of the town board to show up this year then.
Yeah.
We were there.
Yeah, so, ribs and brisket, those are a couple of my specialties, and then,
Oh, yeah.
How come we didn't get to the meeting?
Everybody's real here. You're stuck with chips. All right, so kind of the permits activity, the blue line is new homes, or new construction, the orange is alterations, additions, remodels, and then the gray line is one stop. So that's like a electric service or anything that's just a simple issued permit and just a single inspection, appliance replacement, someone replacing a water heater, furnace, that type of thing. So there was, over 1,100, almost 1,200 of those one-stop permits. So those all generate, a single inspection. 545 new single-family homes in 2018 and 489 permits for renovations. So over 1,000 permits altogether. Commercial was 72 new permits and 73 alterations. And if you see a spike on that in future years, anytime we have multifamily units, those get permitted by unit typically. Depends on how the contractor applies for, but typically each unit is a separate permit, and those fall under commercial. So we'll see a spike there. As it compares to last year permits wise, in 2017 was 516 new homes and 544 renovations. So right in the same ballpark, a slight increase in new homes and a slight decrease in the renovations. but about a 300 increase over last year in one-stop permits.
Explain the one-stop?
One-stop is a single inspection, so like with the furnace appliance replacements,
Oh, okay.
something like a, electric service upgrade where they're changing out their panels, just a single inspection.
Re-roof,
Re-roof inspections, which after hail, it's,
and they're typically, don't require plan reviews, so they can issue online and just pay for them online as well.
You mentioned water heater replacement. If my neighbor gets a new water heater, do they have to get a permit or have to inspect it?
any gas or fuel-fired appliance requires a permit for replacement, because if it's not done properly, it can create either, if there's a gas leak or a leak in the combustion that's produced. If your flue doesn't get reconnected properly, now you're putting carbon monoxide into the house. And so because of the hazard that's created, with those, that they do require a permit and inspection, just for,
What if you had a contractor do work at your house and they said, don't bother, like, promise me I'm doing this right?
Yeah, I'm licensed, I'm bonded.
I'm on the preferred list. at the
Yeah, I'm on
time.
this.
Well, if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it, but when it's reported, there is an investigation fee that is up to or equal to the permit cost, so they could pay a penalty of actually paying double for the permit and still getting the inspection if it's, discovered that they were doing the work without the permit.
So you can't just, hey, I had this done, can you come inspect it?
Yeah, we can't do an inspection without a permit linked to it. The only time that there's really an exception to that, and we still need a permit ultimately to tie it to, is emergency work. If there's been, like a tree that fell on the house or something, and we need to go and, inspect or look at the power to either have, they're gonna pull power or see, kind of more of a damage assessment on the house or some kind of emergency repair, we'll go look at it, even if, let's say it happens in the middle of the night or 10 o'clock at night, town's not open to pull a permit, we'll go look at it just to make sure it's safe, or whatever they've had to do as emergency measures is gonna be safe for the immediate time being, then they'd come pull their permit and we didn't know the results under that. But that's kind of the only instance where we'd be able to do inspections without a permit.
But yeah, you'd have to probably pull a permit after the fact to have somebody come out and look at a water heater, something like that. If somebody installed it without a permit, they could pull a permit after the fact and request the inspection.
Yes.
The one that is really problematic is when people don't pull permits for their basement finish, and then the title company calls us
Right.
and asks us for a permit, and we say we don't have one. Sometimes they do have to remove drywall and,
Yeah, we don't have x-ray vision, we can't see what's
Right.
covered up or behind us,
so if anybody ever asks about basement finish permits,
Yeah.
they are important.
Yes.
Because the title company, when you go to sell your house,
Yeah.
will usually ask.
They say, well, we only show a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and you're advertising a 5-bedroom, 3-bath.
Right.
And it's, so,
So on the water heaters, what, someone goes to a local, well, that's,
Need new water heater?
Okay, I'm guilty, just so everybody.
Got a neighbor.
I'm asking for a friend.
I have a neighbor.
I know a guy.
Scott goes the neighbor down the hill for me.
Tell me heard that, right?
when we moved here, we put a new water heater right away, but
Guilty.
no,
Yeah.
they got a permit, whoever we bought it from went ahead and got a permit,
Mhm.
and it was inspected. I didn't have to do anything, the vendor took care of getting the permit for us.
Mhm.
So is that the normal process, or?
Yeah, oftentimes.
Two people go to Home Depot and buy a water heater and carry it out themselves, there's no permit, is there?
No, but normally any of the HVAC contractors or plumbing contractors, they are the ones that are frequent flyers on our
Right, they come in and
one-stop
get the
shop
permit.
permit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I replaced my water heater this past spring, and
The
the
contractor.
contractor pulled the permit for me too.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so what they do is they sign an affidavit, basically the homeowner will sign saying
Mhm.
that they are acting as their agent, so
Right.
the contractor can pull a permit on their behalf, even though they're the property owner, they're, it's the same owner as agent affidavit.
So it's just the rogue individuals that we don't know about,
Right,
Yeah.
that blow up the neighborhood.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think water heaters are one of those things though where, you know, it's a get it done quick because the house doesn't have hot water and that's, I know that that's what happened, that's what I'm saying.
You call the plumber.
It was like 10 o'clock at night, I called the plumber, I had his cell phone number and I said, we're out, and you know, he shows up at 9 a.m. the next morning. He's
With
putting
the
it
water
in,
heater.
with the water heater, right, he's putting it in. I'm not even thinking about getting in,
Right.
Right, do it
You know.
yourself.
so.
Check,
Yeah.
check CFP.
He saw the van, what do you think?
Yeah.
No secret over there.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah,
I
so-
heard somebody hollering when the water was too cold.
Caleb, I think a number of us go to often ribbon cuttings or, you know, new businesses in town, and I know the
Yeah.
couple I've gone to, I usually try to find the owner and say, hey, how was the permit process, you know? How is it doing business in Windsor? And generally hearing pretty good things, at least
Yeah.
certainly about Safe Build.
Right.
Planning department, yeah, maybe not so much. But one of the guys said there were two inspectors, the Safe Build guy, he said it was great to work with, there was another one, something site,
Site-wise.
site-wise?
Site-wise.
Is that for like erosion or stormwater type inspections? or was
It
that-
turned out to be a firewall issue.
Okay.
And he said they didn't tell, everybody looked at the plans, they said you're good to go, so got the framing in, et cetera, and then after a lot of work was done, the guy from SiteWise came to the site. I guess they're coming out of Denver. And then when he actually walked into the place, he went, oh, wait, no, this needs to be a firewall. So that tear a lot of stuff out, he delayed his
Was it
opening.
the architect or that did that, or was it?
Was it a scam?
Huh?
Maybe it's a scam.
That, wearing, some guy wearing a.
Yeah,
an
they
Agent
gave me
Martin
$500 for this
slip.
inspection.
You know, for $500.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just running through my,
Well, whatever happened, it was a problem for him. I mean, it wasn't, you know, fatal by any means, but
Site-wise is a utility contractor down in Wheat Ridge, so maybe they were coming up here
coming
to
up from
do-
Wheat Ridge. But they didn't actually visit the site until he was,
Yeah. Interesting.
so I don't know, so we don't contract with them, or
No.
they would have come in?
A lot of, you know, one thing that, you know, a lot of times with the footing and foundation work, any kind of commercial project, they have to have a soil engineer doing those. So there's other third-party engineers, like you need structural steel for, you know, large commercial buildings and, you know, the welding and, you know, the tension, all the bolts and connections, those are all done by a third party, either welding or steel inspectors. The soils engineers will do all the concrete work for footing, foundation, slabs. that
And then
type
we
of
just
thing.
get the engineered letters
And
that
we
those
put it in
inspections
our-
took place.
Yeah, so there's, because some of those require special, like if it's a large scope engineered project, then it needs an engineer to sign off on those, on that work.
It's kind of like the foundations of all the homes in town. They're designed by a structural engineer, and usually the same structural engineer is the one that does the inspection and signs off on it as well.
Yeah, because that way they can confirm that the design that they drew up was actually followed. They know what they put into it, and so they'll check that.
I wonder who would have sent SiteWise out there.
No. Inspections wise, kind of tying off with the permits, this last year on single family homes, there was 13,591 inspections on new homes and 4,239 inspections on residential alterations. One-stop inspections, again, was the same as the one-stop permits, 1,181. And commercial new inspections was 6,128 and 787 on alterations. So there was a little bit of a shift from the previous year where it went down by a little over 1,000 inspections on new homes. Alterations stayed roughly the same, but commercial almost doubled on the new commercial inspections. So it went from 3,800 to 6,100, so a little, I guess, about 60% increase.
And again, I think part of that is probably the fact that we've had so much multifamily development in the last instance. That from a building code standpoint, multifamily is considered commercial.
Yeah.
So all the inspections of the new apartments.
Setbacks and everything, yeah, anything, residential code is anything that's a one or a two family dwelling, so a single family home or a duplex. But even if you get into townhomes, anything that's connected more than 2 units is considered a commercial structure. Even, it can still be a residential occupancy in a residential unit, but it's considered a commercial structure for the purpose of building code. because now you're adjacent, now it's not just your home and your family or maybe one other family. Now you're impacting, you're in the same structure with other families and other people, so it's a larger scope, it escalates. So it has additional safety provisions because if one of your neighbors does something, now it has immediate impact because your houses are adjacent with a shared wall. So yeah, overall, you know, it was a good year, you know, just a few shifts with the permits and inspections, but, you know, hasn't slowed down. I know there's been some people predicting some slowdowns in the economy, but we're still bringing on, you know, additional staff member, and with the number of permits that we're seeing coming in, we're not anticipating a slowdown at least through the end of 2019 and into 2020. And talking with some of our analysts and with Russ, Colorado, in general, and specifically northern Colorado as a region, you know, even when there's economic slowdowns, it doesn't really impact us as much. And with the number of people moving out of Denver and still looking to move into the area, you know, that's, even if the interest rates go up a little bit, unless there's a huge spike in interest rates, it's probably not gonna have much of an impact in construction, so. But the nice thing too about the way the contract is that you just pay a percentage of whatever fees are for the permits that are issued. So if permits go down, you're not set with a set dollar amount, because you're just paying for, you know, they pay for whatever they pull and issue, and so that takes the risk off of you all as a town and a board from having a set dollar amount for a department that you have to fund.
Yeah, if it slows down, those six-figure checks to Safe Built go down as well, so.
No, we love the flexibility.
Yeah.
We've talked about that in the past.
I had two questions. One, may not have the right terminology, but foundation being dug, soil preparation, compaction, do we have any guidelines or inspection of that?
That's part of my
Okay,
guidelines for, I mean, there are code requirements, but I guess with residential construction going year-round
yeah,
these days, we have run into some issues with soil compaction, and it's not being done quite the same way it used to be 10 years ago, with people watering and coming back and watering again to
yeah,
let the soil compact. This time of year, you can't, I mean, obviously,
yeah.
if you're digging a hole, you can't water it to settle it. And so that is something that I would propose that, not only in the code, but if we can go above and beyond with soil compaction as well, that is an issue.
It's just hearsay, but I've heard from people who actually, construction workers, who have said, wow, they're not preparing the soil very well.
Right,
So a few years later, cracks in the walls and whatever.
yeah.
The other question I had, from your perspective, Caleb and Scott, is there anything else that we as a town ought to be doing or could be doing to improve the process? I mean, I'm pretty impressive, the turnaround, the success rate and so forth, and we do hear a lot of good feedback for all of you. Is there anything you would see us doing to improve things?
Well, that's
Just to
something.
pick up on that, I thought of this earlier when you were talking about the geographic breadth of your company. And obviously you're seeing how things are done in so many different jurisdictions. Please, if you guys see a best practice out there that is gonna make things efficient and streamlined, bring it, we're quickly.
Yeah, have several initiatives going on right now. One thing that's, I got an email today about was we have a company-wide playbook that we've established where they've gone through and looked at all of our kind of busiest offices. So the Windsor office, we have an office in Atlanta, Georgia, we have one up in Michigan, are kind of the three largest offices. So the Windsor office here is one of our top three busiest offices throughout the country that we have currently. And so what they did is they kind of studied the current practices in place in the different regions and trying to find kind of the most efficient practices from all of them and combining them, and then also taking that around the country. And so we're in the process of reviewing that, looking at what each office is doing that others could do better, and learning from each other. So kind of like what you were saying there. We also had one of our corporate, I think, vice president, I forget what the title was, but he rode with a couple of our inspectors this last week to see kind of what their processes were and what that we could do with the inspection app on the tablets and with the routing software to make more efficient routes and make best use of the time, both to be efficient with getting to the clients and also, keep our staff at a minimum with efficiency rates. And so there's a number of things we're working on to try to incorporate those things.
And along those lines, with the new community core software, there are certain permits that we can issue, we can accept online, we can issue, or accept payment online and issue all online. And I believe that you're working towards eventually being able to submit full drawing sets for home plans, so that we can eliminate a lot of paper and.
Yeah, it makes it faster too, and so that's something with E-plans that's big nationwide. A couple of the jurisdictions I worked with had gone entirely to E-plans where, in order to submit something, it had to be electronic. But that way, instead of our plan review office having to come and pick up the plans or us taking them down to them, you just email it to them or upload it onto, a website, and they can, take it from like DocuShare or different platforms that we have built in that we can be, where as soon as the contractor requests that permit and uploads it, the plan review has it available, and it cuts out a day or so of taking plans back and forth, and so that would make it expedited as well.
Is that something we would have some responsibility with as a town? To upgrade our software or coordinate theirs
I
or
think it would probably all be part of
their package?
Yeah,
community core.
it'd be built within community core, and then there's like an E-plan software or some, I forget what the software version is that for the plan reviewers that would be a part of that, but the contractor would just upload, basically their architect would have, because they usually have electronic versions anyways, because they've drafted them electronically, and they print out a set to send in for plan review. So what they would do is they would just send in the electronic set, and then, they could submit that directly online, upload it, and then we would have that available. And then the contractor, one of the really cool things about that is you can actually take multiple pages of the plan and overlay them as layers, and you see the whole thing, like different floors, and if there's a revision that's made, sometimes if they change one floor plan and they shift a wall or something, you don't really catch that maybe that's not lining up with the support below it when it's on separate pages. But when you can take all those layers and overlay them electronically, then you can catch things like that. So it really enables us to catch things that, are easy to miss otherwise. So there's a lot of, having that technology available really opens up a lot of doors as well as seeing, helping some of the tradesmen interact better, because, electricians, plumbers, HVAC, they all want to use the same floor ceiling space and the wall space or columns for all their ductwork, their plumbing and everything, and so that helps them coordinate within those spaces better, having that
But unlike
model.
some of the other software packages that we pay for, the community core software package is part of our agreement and contract with SafeBuild. So all of the updates and all of the upgrades and things like that, that's part of our,
Yeah,
we don't pay for
provide that as part of our
extra for that.
service.
Question. We talked about the stormwater inspections. Have you talked to them about that yet?
Yeah, I spoke with Caleb's predecessor and Janine and Dennis before he left, and we were starting to look into it. There's some inherent challenges, I guess, with MS4 inspections needing to be, they need to take place every 14 days. And building inspections are sporadic at the request of the builder when they're ready for inspection. So I'm talking to Caleb and Russ, and I'm setting up a meeting with Dennis and Janine and Caleb, probably next week after you've got ICC this week. But I'm hoping to get together with them next week and talk about concepts that might, if nothing else, the community core software is flexible enough that we could probably build in MS4 inspections as a module of some sort, so that Janine can utilize that software for each individual address that she's inspecting. But then
And I've worked with stormwater programs in the past, out in Virginia, which is similar laws, because it's kind of national guidelines, and each state has their different amendments they make to it, regionally. But, most all of them have that 2-week requirement, but some of the programs I've worked under had a flexibility of ranking, like if it's a high-risk site, you'd have every 2-week inspections. If you're right next to an active waterway or somewhere where you really want to keep that sediment from leaving the site and entering the waterway, or a pond or a lake or any kind of water feature, or if it's a steep slope site, but then you'd get down to like a moderate site if it's a lower slope or not right at a waterway, and that would be like maybe every 4-week inspection instead of every 2-week. And then if you're on a really flat lot with no water around it, then it could be as much as every 8 weeks. So there's ways of maybe different, assigning different values or risk levels. And so there's things we're kind of exploring as far as, because to try to visit every active job site, because some of these job sites drag on for years. And so to try to visit every job site that's active, ongoing every 2 weeks would be a big task. So we definitely have to add quite a bit of staff to be able to do that. So.
Yeah, I think conceptually, we've got some ideas that we may be able to at least utilize Safe Built for some aspects, but at the end of the day, if we had to hire Safe Built to do all of the inspections, it would probably be a new service that we would need to, and it's a new service that Safe Built would have to
We
hire.
would have to staff.
Yeah.
Like you saw, most of our staff right now is electricians.
Yeah.
Electricity and water don't really mix very well. Most of them don't have a lot of experience with stormwater and runoff.
Yeah,
and
I'm
that
sure
type
it's
of
a
thing.
specialized.
So it's, so we don't really have anyone on our current staff who has experience with it other than myself. So we would probably be looking to add another staff member and go, have some specific training for that.
We might have some better, fully fleshed ideas maybe by the 15th
Okay,
next month.
that'd be great.
Yeah. Whatever I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
We'll
that's
try to
good.
flesh it out.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it's nice to meet you all, and
Great
look
having you here.
forward to working with you.
Colorado.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we expect brisket next time.
Yeah, we'll come to the
bring it-
parents soon.
Yeah, here at 5:30. We have a list of future board meetings. Is there anything you wants to share with Scott and ask questions about that, or he's representing our staff tonight, so
I might be gone the 25th, I don't know yet. So keep everyone posted.
that's land use code update.
And then, yeah, board meeting.
Okay, anything else? I think our work session is concluded.
Thank you.
Anything new about McAllen?
Yeah, her funeral's on Thursday at 11 o'clock.
This week?